This is Stream Chill, and let's get right into it. We need less stories about black drug dealers and kingpins and more stories that uplift our people. So I'm gonna recommend real black stories that Hollywood should make in order to be a better ally to the black community. And if you don't know about these stories, it's never too late to do the research to find out about them. I didn't know about some of them, but they're real stories, true stories, and the more you dig into this history and the tales of them, the more information you can actually find on all of these stories. I'm gonna just break down a few black stories I think that could be great movies. First up, I'm gonna recommend that Hollywood make a movie out of the Stono Rebellion. I know what you're thinking. Another slave movie? But I'm cut from the cloth that says we shouldn't run from our history. There are a bunch of movies about the Holocaust, and I think there should be yearly movies about the days of slavery, but different. This story is about why South Carolina stopped importing slaves for a decade because they thought black people who was imported from Africa were more likely to rebel. Here's what happened. On September 9th, 1739, things were pretty calm in the South. The French, the British settlers, and the natives were all just plotting for space. Slavery was booming and racism was chugging along doing big things as usual. But Spain was like, yo slaves, if y'all escape and come down to La Florida, we'll give you freedom. Just defend our borders from America trying to take Florida from us. So on that night, September 9th, about 20 slaves led by a slave named Jimmy, they said he was from Angola. He broke into a gun store with his boys, killed the owner, took all the guns. They went along the Stono River, liberating hundreds of slaves. It said they took out around 60 slave owners, women and children, unfortunately. After they had this successful rebellion, they got about 30 to 40 miles away from their slave owners. And they started parading in the streets, shouting, "Liberty, liberty!" They got a little bit further when there was a battle. Some men died. It's believed that some of them eventually made it to Florida. Look, I think that's a great story to tell. People actually gaining their freedom and going to a free land and living their lives out and taking their freedom back from their slave masters. That's a great story to tell. It also reshapes the narratives of just that black people were just there being slaves because they most likely weren't. For the next one, I'm going to jump right into one of my favorite genres of film, horror. Let me introduce you to Mary Ellen Pleasant. She was born a slave, but figured out a way to make millions in the gold rush era in America. She was so poppin' that when the famed abolitionist John Brown was hung for treason, there was a note in his pocket that read, "The axe is laid at the foot of the tree. When the first blow is struck, there will be more money to help." That note was from Mary Ellen Pleasant. The New York Times wrote about her that she lived her life in between the lines of legitimacy and infamy, servitude and self-invention. But here's where this black woman's story takes a dark turn. Many people thought she was a voodoo queen, with one particular article saying she used her long fingers to pull brains out of the heads of men. Another one reporting that she would cast spells on people in order to control them to get them to do her bidding. Most likely all of this is false, although I think there's a bit of truth in some stuff like this. But we all love scary movies and we find them entertaining. For example, I would play it as maybe like a group of drunk young people rent Miss Pleasant's abandoned mansion for a party, and she exacts revenge on what their forefathers did to her people in the past. Just a thought. There are so many ways to examine history of this powerful woman during a dark portion of America's history. Another story I would tell is the story of the Kentucky Raids, which is about a small town of freed black people in Minnesota around about the times of the end of slavery. They were saying that a lot of people escaped from slavery and just started making their new lives in Minnesota, in Cass County. But the racist slave owners in Kentucky, they wanted their property back. So they formed a raid to go into these black people's homes and round up their slaves, the fugitive slaves that they were called. But the Quakers, who were big time abolitionists, was like, nah, that's not happening. One dude named N-Word Bill actually handcuffed himself to stop these people from taking their slaves. And what these slaves did is the men would sacrifice themselves as the women escaped through the night to alert the others in the town. They ended up capturing about 10 or so slaves and heading back to Kentucky. But by this time, all the women had alerted the city folk, and they just blocked their way out of the city with guns. The Kentucky people really wanted their slaves, so they went to court. And they locked all the black people up who were fugitive slaves. But what the abolitionists did, they did a swindle. They bailed out all the slaves and then took them off and sent them off to Canada, where slavery was not, there was no slavery in Canada. And they got free. So it's a courtroom drama, a night raid, and a big standoff. A great story that you guys can just sort of research and Google yourselves. But the Kentucky Raids would be a great film because there's courtroom drama, there's civilization, and there's a lot of people in harmony and harmonious ways. Harmonious. Does that make up a word? I don't know. But it's a great story. People should tell. I'm fascinated with this next tribe, and it's about the Seminoles. There was 100-year war between America and the Seminoles. 3 wars to be exact. Seminole War 1, the Seminole Wars 2, and the Seminole Wars 3. Then there was a guy named John Horace, and John Horace was like the man. And I think you can use John Horace and the story of the Seminoles to tell a Braveheart type story, a Dancing with Wolves type story that involved a lot of strong black warriors fighting for their independence and fighting for their freedom. And John Horace actually led his people to freedom. They went from Florida to Ohio to Mexico, and it just was a great story and a great tale. If you ever have the time, research the story of John Horace. He's an American hero we don't hear a lot about, but he's a great guy and definitely an inspiration to black people all over the world. Another story I would need the world to tell is the story of Rebecca Lee Crumpler. She's one of the first black doctors ever in America. Right when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, they freed about 4 million enslaved people and just let them go. Let them on the streets with no money, no place to go, and a lot of them died because they didn't know how to take care of themselves. Then, what America did is they assigned 120 doctors to take care of these 4 million people. As you can guess, it didn't really work. So Congress and a lot of congressmen went on the floor and said, this is just proof that black people are inferior and we should just let them die off. You know, natural selection. But this one lady, Rebecca Lee Crumpler, she wrote this book, not to doctors, but to black mothers in the South and all over America, letting them know how to take care of themselves, how to prevent diseases like smallpox and all types of other diseases. And she revolutionized care for the black men and women and their families when America just was gonna let black people die after enslaving them for hundreds of years and then freeing them with no money in the segregated land and just locking them up. It's a great untold story of Rebecca Lee Crumpler. Okay, so those are just some of the movies I would make if I was Hollywood. There's a lot of stories to tell about African Americans that are more than just ball players, singers, and entertainers. Like, we have a bunch of great stories in history that you can tell, and every time you do a biopic, it doesn't have to be someone who plays sports or someone who made music or an actor. It could be real people who did phenomenal things just being a regular American. Till next time, peace.